The yellow light on the kitchen ceiling cast a small, lonely circle of brightness in the wide, quiet house. Mrs. Maressa sat still in front of a bowl of cold vegetable soup. The steam had vanished long ago, leaving only a thin film trembling with each tired breath she took. The smell of bleach lingered on her hands, the sharp, stinging scent of a long day spent scrubbing, sweeping, washing, clinging to the air itself. Behind her, the fridge hummed, humming as if to remind her that time was still moving forward, even though her life seemed to have stopped at a place that felt very cold, very dark. On the chair beside her, the green wool scarf, her late husband's last gift to her, slipped down and landed softly on the floor like a falling leaf. She looked at it, her heart tightening, but her hands were too tired to bend down and pick it up right away. Ring. Her phone lit up. A message. She put her spoon down, wiped her hands quickly on her faded apron, and picked up the phone. She thought Jacob, her son, had texted something like, "Mom, we're on our way home," or "Mom, get ready, there's a spot for you at the table." But no. The words on the screen appeared, short and cold like a receipt. "Mother-in-law, please heat up the leftovers in the container. Don't waste them. Clara." She read it once, then a second time, then a third. Each word spread like a crack across a thin porcelain cup, not shattering to the ground, only breaking silently inside her heart, as if her sorrow had worn itself down to the point it no longer had the strength to make a sound. She set the phone down on the table, looked at the cold soup, looked at the spotless kitchen she had scrubbed all afternoon, looked at the fallen scarf at her feet, and then, in a quiet but steady voice, she whispered, "If you think my life is only worth leftover food, then you are wrong." She bent down, picked up the scarf, and smoothed each strand of yarn as if straightening the part of her life that had been wrinkled and crushed. Then she lifted her head, the fog of hopelessness in her eyes replaced by something else, a decision. And if you're listening to this story, I want you to stay until the end. Because tonight, the story of this seemingly fragile 70-year-old woman will leave that entire family speechless. And maybe it will make you rethink how we treat the people who have given their whole lives for us. If you want to know what happened that caused Mrs. Brace, Marissa, to disappear into the night, keep listening to the next part, because what you're about to hear will change the way you look at the word family. Before everything became as bad as it is now, Marissa's life was once warm and full of laughter. 3 years earlier, her husband, Hector, passed away after 6 months of battling pancreatic cancer, 6 months during which she held his hand every day, hoping for a miracle. But on one autumn afternoon, the hospital room grew quieter than usual, and she knew she had lost the partner who had been by her side for more than 40 years. After the funeral, the old house suddenly felt too big, too silent. Every corner reminded her of something. Hector's laughter while fixing the old radio, Jacob's little footsteps running from room to room, the smell of coffee she brewed every morning. The silence in that house was not familiar, it was heavy. 2 weeks later, Jacob came to visit with his wife, Clara. They sat in the old kitchen. Marissa was still folding the green wool scarf, Hector's keepsake, something she did each night to comfort herself. Jacob held her hand and spoke gently. "Mom, we're looking for a new house. The kids are getting big, and our apartment is too cramped." Clara smiled, looking confident. "If you live with us, you won't be lonely, and you can help us with the kids. Really, everyone benefits." Those words softened her heart. The feeling of being needed, of being useful, something she had lost after the funeral, made her believe in their offer. They said they needed $68,000 for the down payment. She didn't hesitate. The old house was sold, and all the money Hector had left was transferred to her son. Her biggest mistake happened right then. Jacob said, "This house is for the whole family, Mom. It doesn't matter whose name is on the papers." Clara nodded. No need to complicate things, just live with us and enjoy. She believed them. She didn't ask to have her name on the property. She thought she was stepping into a new home with her children, with the laughter of her grandchildren. On moving day, she placed the scarf in a small box and closed the lid, as if telling herself that the new chapter of her life would be better. But she didn't know that from that very moment, everything started slipping out of her hands, quietly, slowly, and more painfully than anything she had ever endured. In the first days living with Jacob and his wife, Marissa truly believed she had made the right choice. She woke up early, made breakfast for the whole family, and prepared clothes for the 2 kids. Hearing them laugh every morning eased something inside her, but only a few months later, that lightness disappeared. Clara began making small comments. At first, they sounded ordinary. "Mother-in-law, it seems the kitchen shelf is still dusty today." "Mother-in-law, Liam's clothes look wrinkled." "Mother-in-law, you used a bit too much oil." Day by day, nearly all the household responsibilities ended up on her shoulders. Jacob came home tired from work, always saying the same polite line, "Thanks, Mom." But his eyes stayed on his phone, not on her. The 2 children, Liam and Sophia, always ran to hug her when they came home from school. Liam told her stories about class, while Sophia liked to sit on her lap to listen to bedtime tales. Those moments were the only thing that made her feel she still had meaning in this house. But that closeness made Clara uncomfortable. Every time she saw the kids clinging to Marissa, her face darkened slightly, though she tried to hide it. One evening, the family sat down for dinner. Marissa had just placed the food on the table when Clara pulled out a chair and sat exactly where Marissa was about to sit. No one seemed to notice, and Marissa said nothing. She stood there for a few seconds, then quietly stepped back into the corner of the kitchen, as if her place had never belonged at the family table. For 3 years, it happened often enough for her to understand she was no longer seen as part of the family. She cleaned, washed, cooked, cared for the children. Yet when the family took photos, the daughter-in-law would only say, "Mother-in-law, can you take the picture for us? Your hands are steadier." The family portrait hanging in the living room didn't include her. No one asked if she wanted to take another shot. Whenever she was too tired, she would reach into her drawer and touch the green wool scarf. It was the only thing reminding her she had once been loved, once belonged somewhere. But in this house, she was just the one behind the kitchen door, quietly keeping everything running while no one truly saw her. And she didn't know that Clara's actions, the small comments, the constant nitpicking, the cold looks, were slowly pushing her toward the day she would finally have to stand up. That morning, the atmosphere in the house felt different. Clara walked downstairs in unusually high spirits, wearing a fitted gray office shirt, her face glowing with excitement. Marissa, standing by the stove flipping pancakes for the kids, turned and asked gently, "Something good happened, dear." Clara adjusted her hair, smiling with confidence. "I got promoted. They chose me as regional manager, youngest in the company." Jacob came down the stairs, hugged his wife tightly. "I knew it. You deserve it." The children cheered and congratulated their mother. The room was full of excitement, and sincerely, Marissa felt happy for her daughter-in-law. She set the plate of pancakes on the table and said, "Congratulations, Clara. I'm glad your hard work is being recognized." Clara only gave her a brief nod, then turned to Jacob. "We have to celebrate tonight. Skyline Tower? The place with the city view?" Jacob brightened. "That sounds great. Let's go, all of us." Marissa's heart warmed at the words, "all of us." She asked softly, "Should I make the reservation? It'll be crowded tonight." Clara looked up, pausing as if suddenly remembering Marissa was even in the room. You misunderstood. Tonight is a private celebration. Just our small family. And my mom, she's coming from another state." Jacob stared down at his plate, saying nothing. Marissa pressed her lips together and nodded. "All right, I understand." Clara continued, her tone unintentional but sharp enough to sting. "Besides, someone has to stay home. We'll feel better knowing you're here. If you get hungry, just eat something from the fridge." Breakfast went on normally, but inside her an empty space opened up, not because of the dinner, but because of how naturally they assumed she would stay home alone. At 11 a.m., the whole house was getting ready to leave. Clara changed outfits 3 times, and the children were thrilled to be wearing their best clothes. Jacob walked over, kissed his mother's forehead. "We're heading out, Mom. We'll be home late." No one asked what she wanted. No one noticed she hadn't eaten lunch. No one noticed her slightly red eyes after a long night of cleaning. When the door closed, the wide house fell into silence. She cooked a cheap packet of soup and sat alone in the kitchen, just as she did every day. That evening, she opened Clara's Instagram and stopped at a stream of photos. The whole family is smiling brightly. Fancy wine glasses. An expensive steak dinner. The 2 kids are posing happily beside a large plate of prawns. Everyone in the photos looked happy, except her, the one sitting at home eating soup alone. Clara had written, "Family only, celebrating the woman who never stops striving." Marisa wasn't angry. She simply felt herself erased from the picture of her own family. Her phone buzzed. A message from Clara. "Mother-in-law, please heat up the leftovers in the container. Don't waste them." Just that, yet it struck the very place she had forced herself to endure for 3 years. She set the phone down, and she knew tonight would not pass like all the others. After reading the message, Marisa sat still for a long time. She didn't cry, she didn't get angry. She simply felt a clarity she had never allowed herself to look at directly before. She slowly stood up. Her legs trembled a little from sitting too long, but her eyes were no longer tired. They were calm, clearer, as if she could finally see the direction she needed to go. She opened her wardrobe. The suitcase lay in the bottom corner, covered with a thin layer of dust. She pulled it out and placed it on the bed without a second thought. Then she opened the drawer and took out the green wool scarf. Hector's gift when she turned 40. She held it for a moment, then placed it neatly inside the suitcase, not because she wanted to leave in a rush, but because she knew it was time to protect her own life. For the past 6 months, she had been quietly preparing, something no one in the house knew. At night, when Jacob and Clara went to sleep, she sat and recorded receipts, took photos of documents, and put them into a notebook. While cleaning rooms, if she overheard anything that made her uneasy, she recorded it, not for revenge, only for when the moment might come. And today, that moment had arrived. She picked up her phone and scrolled to Natalie Cruz's number, a distant relative and a young attorney. It rang only once before Natalie answered. "Aunt Marisa, what's going on? Why are you calling me at this hour?" Marisa's voice was soft but steady. "Come over tomorrow night. I need you to look at some important papers." There was a pause, and then Natalie replied quietly, "Okay, Auntie, I'll be there." Marisa hung up and dialed the second number. Mr. Ramos, the notary who had known the family for nearly 20 years. He answered in his deep voice. "Marisa, what's the matter so late?" "I need you to review some house ownership papers. Tomorrow morning?" "Of course. Come by my office at 10. Her last call was to Linda, her longtime friend. Just hearing Marisa say her name made Linda immediately sense something. "Marisa, your voice sounds different. Are you all right?" "Linda, do you still have a spare room?" Linda didn't ask anything else. "Yes. Come anytime you need." Marisa set the phone down and closed the suitcase. The soft click of the lock echoed clearly in the dimming room. For 3 years, she had looked for reasons to stay, but tonight, she chose the reason to leave. She no longer wanted to live in a place where her silence was taken for granted. Under the warm, yellow light of the room, her decision felt clearer than ever. No drama, no noise. Just an older woman finally realizing she, too, deserves to be treated with kindness. The next morning, Marisa woke earlier than usual. She brewed a small pot of tea, set it on the table, then pulled from the drawer the notebook she had quietly written in for many months. The pages were old, the edges slightly curled, but every line inside was clear. There was no evidence to use against anyone. They were evidence for herself, a reminder of how hard she had tried for 3 years to keep the household running, to hold everything together. The first page listed all the expenses she had covered since moving in with Jacob and Clara, including repairing the washing machine, replacing the faucet, fixing the roof, medicine for the kids, groceries, and household supplies. None of them were significant expenses, but over 3 years the total was far from small. The second page was filled with bills, along with photos of neatly clipped receipts organized by month. She didn't record them to calculate anything with anyone. She simply feared that one day she might no longer be clear-minded enough to remember what had really happened. Then came the audio recordings. Not many. Only a few she felt necessary to keep. One was Clara talking to a friend on the phone. Having my mother-in-law at home saves on hiring help. She cleans well, watches the kids. If it's convenient, you should take advantage of it. Another one. Clara's voice low and exhausted. When will Jacob finally send her to a nursing home? I need my space in this house. I can't take it anymore. Marisa remembered that day clearly. She had been standing in the hallway holding Sophia's toy basket, her back stiffening. No one knew she heard it. Among the documents was one paper she guarded more carefully than all the others, a copy of the house ownership certificate. Only her name was on it, not Jacob's, not Clara's. On the day she transferred ownership from her old house to the new one, she had accidentally left a copy behind, a tiny act, yet it became the most essential proof of her rights. When she looked at that paper, she felt no sense of winning or losing, only peace and a bit of relief. At precisely 10 a.m., she arrived at Mr. Ramos's office. He had known her family for many years, so when she walked in, his expression showed a flicker of concern. "Something serious happened, didn't it?" he asked. She simply placed the file on the desk. "Please look this over for me. I want to know whether everything is still legally correct." He opened each document, examining every detail. The room was silent except for the sound of turning pages and the soft tapping of his pen on the desk. Finally, Mr. Ramos looked up. "Marisa, the ownership of the house is still yours. Their names don't appear on any legal document." She nodded. "I want to prepare everything for tomorrow's meeting." He understood immediately. "I'll arrange it. Tomorrow at 2, all of you can come here." Later that afternoon, Natalie, her niece, arrived. She reviewed the entire file again. Young as she was, her voice was steady. "You did very well, Auntie. These will protect your rights." Marisa let out a quiet breath, not because she wanted to cause trouble, but after enduring so many years, she finally had the chance to stand up for herself. On the way home, she wrapped the green wool scarf around her neck, this time not to remember the past, but to remind herself she wasn't alone on this path anymore. That evening, the house was so quiet that Marisa could hear the ticking of the wall clock, beat by beat. Jacob and Clara weren't home yet, and the children were fast asleep in their room. She stood in the hallway looking at the closed doors one by one. Her son's room, her grandchildren's room, the living room with its dim yellow lamps still left on from the afternoon. This place had once been her new hope, but now it felt like a temporary stop where she had stayed far too long. She walked into her room and pulled up the suitcase she had prepared the night before. It didn't contain much, only what she truly needed: a few sets of clothes, her notebook, the documents, and the green wool scarf. Before leaving, she glanced around the room, not out of sentiment, but to make sure she hadn't forgotten anything important. Everything was still neat, exactly as she always kept it. She turned off the light and gently closed the door. At the front door, she paused. For 3 years, she had never locked this door from the outside. She'd always been the one inside, the one waiting for them to come home. But this time, She lifted the key and turned it. The small click was soft, yet enough for her to feel her decision settle firmly inside her. Outside, the night air was cooler than usual. The moon hung high, bright enough to illuminate the path from the doorstep to the gate. She pulled her suitcase along that path, each step slow but steady. An Uber stopped at the curb. The driver, a kind-looking middle-aged man, stepped out to help. "Ma'am, need help with a suitcase?" She smiled. "Thank you, I can manage." Once in the car, the driver asked, "Where to, ma'am?" She looked straight ahead, her voice soft but clear. "To my friend's house. It's not far." Then she added, almost as if speaking to herself, "I'm just heading toward my own life." The car rolled away from the neighborhood. Through the window, she watched the house grow smaller until it was only a dark outline behind the trees. Not sadness, not regret, just a calmness she hadn't felt in years. Anyone who saw her then would have noticed an unusual serenity on her face, like someone who had just stepped out of a cramped room and could finally breathe again. And if you've been following this story, you might think everything is already clear. But in truth, what happened after she left that house was something many would find unbelievable. Around 11 p.m., Jacob's car stopped at the curb. The family had just returned from the celebration at Skyline Tower. The two children had nodded off on their father's shoulders. And Clara was still buoyant from the afterglow of the celebration. The door opened. No one noticed the house was darker than usual. There was no soft sound of Marisa moving in the kitchen, no warm smell of tea or the light she usually left on for them. Jacob carried the children to their rooms first. Clara went straight to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator for a drink. She paused when she saw the container of leftovers still there, unopened. Her mood sank a little, but she said nothing. When Jacob returned to the living room, he noticed the first strange thing. "Mom's light has been off since early?" Clara shrugged. "Maybe she's asleep." But when Jacob walked to his mother's room and opened the door, his world seemed to slow down. The room was empty. The suitcase was gone. Clothes and personal items had nearly vanished. The room was tidy but cold, as if no one had ever lived there. Clara ran to stand beside him. Her face went pale. "Jacob, what's happening?" Jacob didn't answer. His eyes fell on an envelope lying neatly on the bed with small lettering, "To Jacob and Clara." He opened it. Inside were a handwritten letter, a stack of printed documents, a copy of the house ownership certificate, her expense notebook. The moment Jacob saw the title deed, his hands went weak. He picked it up and read each line carefully. Owner's name, Marisa Alvarez. No one else. Clara put her hand to her mouth, visibly trembling. "No, this can't be... I thought... Jacob, didn't you say..." Jacob sat down on the edge of the bed. His face fell as if drained of strength. He opened the letter. His mother's handwriting was gentle and neat. "Jacob, Clara, I am not angry with you. But I cannot continue living in a place where I am no longer part of the meal, the conversation, or the family photo. Tomorrow morning, we will meet at Mr. Ramos's office. I want everything to be clear. I ask that you remain calm. This is not a separation. This is so we can live together more kindly." Clara slid down to the edge of a cabinet, her face ashen. Jacob, she knew everything. She had prepared everything. Jacob said nothing. He just sat there holding the letter, and for the first time in many years felt his heart heavy as if someone were striking it. He remembered every moment his mother had stood behind him, every time he had ignored the sadness in her eyes, and every time Clara had asked her to do small tasks without him speaking up. Then he looked around the empty room. Only one thing remained. The single family photo that included her was placed face down on the dresser. He turned it over. In the picture, she was smiling very gently. It was then that Jacob understood. His mother had truly gone, and tomorrow their lives would change in ways they could not have anticipated. The next morning, the air was still a bit cold. Marisa and Natalie entered Mr. Ramos's notary office. The room was quiet, with the scent of wood and coffee lingering, which eased her heart a little. Natalie set the file on the table and rechecked each page. Marisa sat quietly, her hands folded. 3 years of endurance were now condensed into one morning. At 9:55, the door opened. Jacob entered first. His shirt was slightly wrinkled, his face tired. His eyes met his mother's, and he bowed his head in a small, sincere greeting. "Good morning, Mom." Shortly after, Clara came in. No heavy makeup, no red dress like last night. A dark coat, hair tied low. She avoided looking at Marisa. Mr. Ramos adjusted his glasses and spoke evenly. "Let us begin." The room fell silent. Natalie opened the documents and spoke very clearly. First, the house ownership. The name on the papers is Marisa Alvarez. You two have no legal percentage. Clara clenched her hands, slightly trembling. Jacob leaned back in his chair, as if accepting the truth. Second, Natalie continued, over the past 3 years, Mrs. Marisa paid $68,000 for the down payment, plus more than $900 each month toward the mortgage. Purchases of furniture and repairs were all paid by her. Mr. Ramos added, if Mrs. Marisa wishes, she has the right to request immediate vacating of the house or to demand full compensation. No one spoke. Clara lowered her face, her shoulders drooping. Then Natalie presented 3 options. The two of you move out within 30 days, repay the full $136,800 within 90 days, divide the property 60-40 with 60% belonging to Mrs. Marisa, with specific conditions. Jacob looked up. What are the conditions? For the first time, Marisa spoke. Her voice was calm, warm as when she spoke to her grandchildren. My condition is that our family keeps a place to come back together. Clara looked up, eyes red. Mom, you want to keep us in the house? After everything? Marisa looked at her for a moment and said, not to punish, to teach you how to live with others, to respect others, things I did not receive. Natalie continued reading. The family that Mrs. Marisa chooses will rent the portion of the house she owns. They will live together in that space. Rent will be paid directly to her. Clara unconsciously squeezed her hands together. No one shouted. No one cast blame. Only silence that forced people to look at themselves. Jacob broke the silence. Mom, I'm sorry. I listened to everything you recorded. I truly don't know what else to say. His voice choked. Clara turned, tears falling onto the table. Aunt, I am truly sorry. Not because I was exposed, but because hearing my own words, I see I have become someone I don't want to be. No excuses, no defenses. Marisa nodded lightly. You don't need to promise me anything. Change is up to you. As for me, I choose to leave to keep some peace for myself. Clara wiped her tears. I don't expect immediate forgiveness, but please give me a chance to make amends. Marisa looked straight at her for the first time since entering the room. Respecting the elderly is not because we are old. It is because one day you will reach this age. Live so that your children will not turn away. Clara bowed her head, her hands small and clasped. I understand. Jacob placed the first signature. No hesitation, no further questions. Clara signed after him, her hand slightly trembling but decisive. Mr. Ramos stamped the papers. The stamp sounded clear against the pages. A chapter had closed. When everything was completed, Jacob turned to his mother. May I take you home? No need, she said softly. I am fine. And from today, we will learn how to speak to one another as a real family. Jacob nodded. His eyes held gratitude and shame. Clara did not dare come close. But as Marisa stood to leave, she said one sentence. Thank you for still giving us a chance. Marisa replied, everyone has a chance. Whether you keep it depends on how you live each day. A week after the house division paperwork was signed, the Elena Campos family moved in. The morning sky was a bit gloomy, but the sound of the moving truck and the chatter of children made the house feel different from usual. Elena, a woman in her 50s, small but quick on her feet, stepped out first. Her two children, Luis 14 and Ariana 11, carried boxes they had decorated with colored markers. Jacob stood at the door, greeting them with a slightly awkward but sincere smile. Clara stood beside him, silent for a few seconds before managing to say, "Hi, Elena. Please make yourself at home." Her voice was soft but not strained like before. Elena responded with a warm smile. "Thank you. The kids have been hoping for a stable place to stay." Clara nodded gently, avoiding eye contact but showing no hostility. Everyone worked together to unpack. Elena wiped down the kitchen counter herself. Luis helped Michael move a cabinet, and Ariana explored every corner with curiosity. Clara stepped into the kitchen and was surprised to see Elena cooking something. "Elena, you're using the stove already?" "Yes, I'm making some soup for the kids. If you need the stove, I'll clear it right away." Clara stayed silent for a few seconds. Before, she would have been irritated, but today, she only said gently, "It's fine, you go ahead." Elena smiled and continued stirring the soup. The aroma filled the kitchen, making the space feel warmer and inviting. Within just one afternoon, the kids were already acting as if they'd known each other forever. Ariana helped little Sophia choose dresses for her doll. Luis taught Michael how to adjust the pedals on his bike. Laughter echoed through the backyard. Jacob watched them, letting out a relieved sigh. "I didn't think the kids would get along this fast." Clara watched too, her voice quiet. "Kids don't carry the prejudices that adults do." A simple sentence, but Jacob understood exactly what she meant. That evening, Elena prepared a big pot of soup. "With more people in the house, I made extra so everyone gets some." Clara had intended to decline, but when she saw Ariana happily inviting everyone to eat, she simply said, "Thank you, I'll set the table." Jacob glanced at his wife, his eyes warm, relieved to see her trying. When the two families sat at the table, Clara seemed a bit stiff, but Ariana placed a bowl in front of her. "I served you first, because cooking must be tiring." The words made Clara's eyes well up with tears. No one noticed, but Elena did. While cleaning the kitchen, Elena said softly, "I know living with strangers can be uncomfortable, but I believe kindness makes things easier." Clara stood still for a moment before nodding. "I'm learning to be less strict." Elena smiled. "That's good. Every home has hard days, but with respect, you get through them." Clara didn't respond, but her expression softened. That night, Jacob called Marisa. "Mom, they moved in. Things are actually better than I expected." Marisa smiled over the phone. "That's good. What I wanted wasn't to punish anyone, but for you to understand that living together requires empathy." Jacob sighed. Relieved. "I understand now." Later that night, Clara walked past the living room. She saw Luis and Michael working on a puzzle, Ariana and Sophia making greeting cards. On the table was Elena's soup, still steaming. The scene was simple, ordinary, yet warmer than any evening before. Clara stood still for a moment. Perhaps the arrival of the Campos family wasn't just a lesson for them. It truly helped the house become a real home again. A week after Elena's family moved in, Jacob called Marisa. "Mom, can we start our first therapy session this week?" She agreed. Jacob arrived on time, bringing 2 cinnamon teas, her favorite. He didn't say much, but his effort was evident in small gestures. The therapy room was softly lit, with a simple sofa and the faint scent of essential oils. Marisa sat on one side, Jacob on the other. Both unsure how to begin, Dr. Montero said gently, "You don't need to share everything today. Just speak about what feels heaviest." Jacob took a breath. "I'm sorry for letting you live like an outsider in your own home." Marisa didn't respond right away. She looked at him, gentle, but sad. "What hurt me?" wasn't the housework. It was feeling like I was no longer your mother. Jacob lowered his head. He didn't try to explain it away. She continued, "For 3 years, almost every day I wanted to ask you, do you still need me?" But I was afraid of the answer. Her voice was calm, not accusatory, like she was putting down a heavy stone. Jacob wiped his eyes and said quietly, "I do need you. I've always needed you. I just didn't have the courage to face the fact that I had abandoned you." The doctor nodded. "Healing begins when both of you dare to speak the truth." Their first session ended in silence, but the kind that makes the heart lighter. I listened to the recordings, and I realized you endured much more than I thought. I thought staying silent meant I was keeping the peace, but really, my silence was what hurt you most. Marisa's voice softened. "You're the person I love most in this world. I just wanted you to see me once in a while." Jacob nodded, eyes red. "From now on, I'll see you, I promise." Not a considerable promise, but sincere. Marisa shared something small. "The other day I went grocery shopping and accidentally bought the wrong flour. I used to call you to ask, but now I choose it myself. I'm happy I can handle things on my own." Jacob let out a small, rare smile she hadn't seen in years. "You're capable of everything, Mom. You always have been. I just want to help you, too." She tilted her head. "Then help me by asking one question every day. How are you today?" Just that. Jacob nodded, earnest. "I will." He began visiting more often. Once he brought a small bouquet. "They were selling these at the market. Thought you'd like them." Marisa smiled. It had been so long since she received simple joy like that. Some days, he came just to fix a crooked shelf. Some days, he brought her a box of red strawberries, her favorite, which he remembered from childhood. She noticed every change in him. Slow, steady, real. After their 6th session, it began to drizzle as Jacob drove her home. He suddenly said, "I know why you always wore that green scarf." She turned, surprised. "Because when you were hurt, you needed something to hold on to." Marisa looked out the window for a moment before replying, "I don't wrap it around me as much anymore, because I'm getting better." Jacob didn't answer. He just smiled, the exact smile she remembered from when he was a small boy running across the yard after sunset. No pressure, no strained roles of mother and son, just two people learning how to love each other the right way. Asking, listening, respecting, and never again treating family as something guaranteed. From the day Elena's family moved in, Clara began to change, little by little. No one pressured her, no one reminded her, but she realized on her own that she had to live differently. One morning, Elena was preparing lunch for the kids. Clara walked downstairs, instinctively ready to check everything the way she used to. "Are you using the right cooking oil? Maybe I should—" Elena turned around, smiling gently. "I'm just making something simple. If you like, I'll leave some for everyone later." Clara froze. She realized she was repeating the same controlling behavior she once used on Marisa. "It's fine. You cook. I just came down to look." For the first time, Clara stepped back instead of interfering. A small thing, but truly important. Ariana was struggling with her math homework. Clara walked past, intending to go upstairs, but stopped. "What are you working on?" "Fractions. I don't understand this part." Clara pulled out a chair and explained each step clearly. Ariana looked at her with bright eyes. "Thank you, Miss Clara. You explain it so well." The tiny thank you made Clara's throat tighten. It had been a long time since she felt genuinely appreciated for something simple. While the kids played in the yard, Elena washed the dishes and Clara wiped the table. Normally, she would never stand in the kitchen working alongside someone else, but today she stayed. Elena spoke softly. "Clara, living together means there will be moments of discomfort. If anything feels strange to you, just tell me." Clara lowered her head. It's not you. I'm the one who has to relearn how to behave. I was too harsh with Jacob's mom." Elena looked at her with kind eyes. "Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is that we correct them." Clara swallowed a sigh. "I just hope that one day she can look at me without sadness." Elena replied, "That day will come. With what you're doing now, I believe it." No one demanded this from her. No rule required her to do it. But she knew she had problems. Over-controlling, easily jealous, fear of comparison, constant anxiety about not being good enough. At her first therapy session, Clara said, "I don't want to be someone who hurts others anymore." The therapist replied gently, "The journey of change begins with that sentence." From that day on, Clara began learning to let go. Less controlling, more listening. Less competing, more sharing. The afternoon was quiet. Marissa was watering her small potted plants outside her rented room when her phone rang. Caller ID, Clara. She hesitated for a second, then answered. "Am I disturbing you, ma'am?" "No. What is it?" Clara took a deep breath. "I just wanted to say thank you for giving us a chance to keep living without losing everything." Marissa remained silent. Clara continued, "I know I did things I shouldn't have. I'm changing. I don't dare ask for forgiveness yet, but I hope you'll see my effort." Marissa's voice was gentle, neither blaming nor bitter. "If you truly change, I will see it." Clara's voice trembled. "Thank you. I'll try." It wasn't an empty promise. It was genuine sincerity. One evening, Jacob was working late. In the kitchen, Elena was rinsing rice for dinner. Clara stepped beside her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Let me cook today. Something simple for everyone." Elena was slightly surprised. "You can cook for a big group?" Clara smiled. "Yes, and I'm doing it because I want to, not because anyone asked." Clara made a pot of potato and beef stew, a dish Marissa had taught her when she first married Jacob. Ariana said it tasted delicious. Luis asked for another bowl. Sophia beamed with excitement. Clara turned away so no one would see her eyes reddening. She knew this was the first time in years she cooked a meal not to be praised, not to prove herself, but simply to care for a home in the truest sense. Nearly 4 months had passed since the house was divided, and life between the two families under the same roof began to settle. The tension slowly disappeared, replaced by small habits of respect. During that time, Clara continued therapy consistently. She changed noticeably. Less irritable, more patient, willing to admit mistakes, able to stop herself before saying something hurtful. One weekend afternoon, while Jacob took the kids to the park, Clara stayed home alone. She took out a stack of papers she had prepared days earlier and read through them carefully from start to finish. Then she texted Marissa, "Ma'am, are you free this afternoon? I want to talk to you about something important." Marissa replied briefly but without coldness. "All right, come over." Her small room smelled faintly of chamomile tea. Marissa was knitting, the old scarf she cherished now washed and folded neatly beside her. "Sit down." Clara sat, her hands clasped together as if holding herself steady. "Ma'am, these past months I've thought a lot. I know how big my mistakes were. Not because anyone told me, but because I feel I owe you too much." Marissa didn't interrupt. She simply listened. Clara took the documents from her bag and placed them on the table. "This is a proposal to repay your share of the property. I've spoken with the bank and they agreed to let me pay in installments over 5 years. I'll pay you $2,300 a month. The interest and legal paperwork I've already completed." Her voice trembled at the end. Clear numbers, transparent terms, no ambiguity, no attempt to benefit herself. After a long pause, Marissa spoke softly. "Have you thought this through? Paying that amount won't be easy." Clara nodded, without hesitation this time. "If you hadn't helped us back then, we wouldn't have this home at all. I don't want to live one more day feeling like I'm using someone else's property. I want to return it in the literal sense, to return fairness and return the kindness you showed us. Marissa set the papers down and looked directly at her. You're doing this because you feel guilty or because you want to prove something? Clara shook her head. Not to prove anything, because I want to live more decently than before, and because I want to teach my children that responsibility is paid with action. Marissa remained quiet for a moment. Then she asked, Does Jacob know about this? Yes, and he supports it. Marissa let out a long breath, not weary but relieved. That you were able to do this. I see it. I agree. Clara bowed her head as tears streamed down her face. Not loud, not sobbing, just tears of relief and gratitude. Thank you. Truly. Thank you. Marissa said simply, No need to thank me. This is your step toward making things right. Forgiveness is something time will decide. Clara wiped her tears and nodded firmly. I understand. Ma'am, if you're free someday, would you come over for dinner with my family? I want, not to start over, but to do better than before. Marissa looked at her for a long moment, then smiled gently. We'll see. But the way you've spoken today makes me glad. Clara bowed, then left, her steps lighter than before. Later that evening, Marissa handed the papers to Natalie. Dear, Clara gave me a repayment proposal. I'd like you to check if all the terms are correct. Natalie looked surprised. You're really taking the money back? Marissa replied, Yes, because it's no longer just money. It's an apology through action, and a way for her to stand on her own. Natalie chuckled softly. You're soft-hearted again. No, Marissa answered quietly. I'm choosing the fairest way for everyone. After everything had gradually settled, Marissa moved to a small room in the Coyote district. The room wasn't large, but it was bright, with a window facing the shared garden and a tiny kitchen corner where she could make tea each morning. She woke up early, opened the window to welcome the sunlight, then put the kettle on the stove. Her new life didn't have much noise, nor the overwhelming responsibilities she once carried. Each day passed gently, just enough. In the building where she lived, many residents were around her age. Seeing her sitting on the porch knitting, a few asked, Can you teach us? It looks really nice. So every Friday afternoon, Marissa held a small knitting class in the common room. She didn't charge a fee. She simply wanted company, people to talk to, share with, and spend time together in warmth. The room filled with soft laughter and the rhythmic clicking of knitting needles. She felt peace settling into her heart with each session. Linda lived only a few blocks away. Whenever they were free, the two of them walked around the small lake near the park. They talked about their children, new dishes they tried, the weather, and the little things that filled their older years. No exhaustion, no pressure to pretend to be cheerful. One day, Linda said, You're different now, Marissa. You seem much lighter. She only replied, I think I made the right choice. Every week, Jacob visited his mother. No formal appointment. He simply knocked on the door with some fruit or a small bouquet of flowers. Mom, I dropped by for a bit. They drank tea and talked about therapy, about the children, about how Clara was changing. Jacob no longer avoided things. He genuinely asked how she was and genuinely listened. Marissa could feel it more and more each day. One afternoon, Jacob said, Mom, thanks to your patience, I've managed to fix at least part of myself. She smiled, soft, warm. Fixing anything at all is already good. No one is perfect, son. Clara didn't visit often, but whenever she cooked something good, she sent Marissa a photo. Ma'am, I made the braised pork recipe you taught me. Jacob loved it. Or, Sophia misses you. She asked if you're free this weekend. Sometimes even a short message. Today I finished my 12th therapy session. I feel better than before. Marissa read every message, feeling as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders, not because Clara was perfect, but because she was truly trying. In the morning, Marissa took a walk. In the afternoon, she taught knitting, brewed tea, and read. In the evening, she looked at messages from her children or called Linda. No one disturbed her. No one asked her to clean, cook, endure, or remain silent. Her new life wasn't luxurious or loud, but it was a life she chose for herself, and that made it enough. One evening, as she sat by the window watching the streetlights glow against the small road below, she smiled, not because everything was perfect, but because she knew her life was finally back on the right path, gentle, peaceful, and meaningful. One weekend afternoon, Jacob brought Liam and Sophia to visit Marisa as usual. The three of them decided to go to the nearby park and bought 3 vanilla ice creams, Sophia's favorite. The weather was lightly sunny, with just enough breeze to keep things cool. The kids ran ahead while Marisa and Jacob walked slowly behind. When the 3 of them sat on a stone bench by the lake, Sophia turned, propped her chin on her knees, and asked a question that made both Marisa and Jacob freeze. "Grandma, when you left the house that day, were you sad?" Marisa looked at her granddaughter's young face, curious, sincere. She smiled and brushed the child's hair. "Yes, I was sad, sweetheart, but if I hadn't left that day, how would we have a happy afternoon like this one?" Sophia nodded, not fully understanding, but smiling brightly. Liam leaned his head on Marissa's shoulder and whispered, "I miss you in the old house, but I like it more when you smile like you do now." Jacob heard that and went still. He looked at his mother for a long moment, then said softly, "Sincerely, Mom, thank you for not abandoning us, even though we once hurt you." She simply placed a hand on his shoulder. "As long as you understand that, it's enough." They sat for a while longer. No one spoke much, but peace wrapped around them with every breath. Marisa's green wool scarf rested on her shoulders. The breeze passed by, making the fibers sway gently, not to hide sadness, not to hold on to the past, but simply because it belonged to her, the way she had finally found herself again after years of quiet endurance. Marisa's story isn't meant to remind anyone of their faults. It's meant to remind us that respecting the elderly is not an obligation. It is the foundation that allows a family to last. If we treat their sacrifices as something automatic, one day we will lose the most precious thing of all: family bonds. If Marisa's story makes you reflect on family, on how we treat the people who love us, you're welcome to stay on this channel to hear more stories. Real stories, close to everyday life. And who knows? Someday you might see a part of your own family in them.